Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? This is the Spartan Nation Podcast with Matt Lonsberry and Aiden McCrone, uh, making our second episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Um, we'll give it a little time here to let some people jump in, hopefully, and then we'll jump into it. A few different topics today. We're going to talk Michigan State basketball recruiting, and Aiden and I have both made some top 10 lists of the most important Michigan State football players, and uh, and also some instant impact freshmen that we're looking forward to seeing this fall. So, um, yeah, I think we'll just go ahead and get started. And if people jump in, that's great. If not, they can watch the recording. So, um, yeah, so I guess we'll get right into it with that top 10 list of most important Michigan State football players. I wrote an article on this a couple weeks ago, so some people might have already seen that, but I don't know what Aiden's got, who Aiden has on his list. So we'll kind of play off of each other. And so Aiden, I guess we'll start with you with one of your most important players. I was thinking we'd go like 10 up to one. We'll see how well we do. So who's your 10th most important Michigan State football player?
Yeah. And kind of when I was ranking these, what I was thinking of was like importance. It's like I'm not ranking the best players or like who I think is, the most talented. It's who is the most important heading into this season. So, really, for number 10, I actually kind of had closer to 20 than 10, but I kind of just said the third receiver after Keon Coleman and Trey Mosley. For that, I said Jaron Glover, Christian Fitzpatrick, or Tyrell Henry, also Montori Foster, possibly. So I think just like those 3, 4 guys, I think that's going to be really important when the season rolls around. Just because obviously they've had a lot of um, productivity the past 2 years. Obviously, the quarterback situation is a whole different, story that we've dove into over articles and we've talked about previously. But I think the wide receiver play has been very consistent when guys are getting the ball, and I think um, we'll see how that rolls over now that Jaden Reed's gone, and Jalen Naylor's been gone for 2 years. So I think there's a lot of good rising stars and young players that could make an impact and are going to be important this season.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that too is that, like, if you would have asked me during the season last year, like, who's that number three receiver going to be? It's probably going to be Jeremy Bernard. I would imagine.
Right,
Obviously, he ends
right.
up transferring back home to Washington, he was originally committed to, and that was, I would argue, maybe the biggest transfer loss that Michigan State had this past offseason. So yeah, that's a good answer. Is like, who's going to be that third guy, because you know that Keon's going to draw a lot of attention.
Mhm.
Trey Mosley's a veteran. He's probably going to play in the slot. You think
Yeah,
Trey Mosley's going
Mosley.
to play?
Yeah, Mosley will be
Yeah.
in a slot.
And
I
so
don't
who's
see
that other
him.
guy on the outside? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. For my number 10, I'm going to the offensive line, which I think is a huge area of that needs to improve this year. And so I've got Nick Samac, the senior, fifth year senior at center. Just it's important to kind of have those guys who have the experience. And I know Michigan State's offensive line hasn't been, it's been average at best, I would say, the last couple of years. And so sometimes when you bring back returners off of what's been an average offensive line, you wonder if that's a good thing or not. But I do think it is good to have Samac back. I think he's a good center, and uses that experience to kind of get everybody on the right page. And so he was my number 10 guy. Um, And yeah, they got to be better, especially in the run game. I felt like one of the reasons why their pass game struggled so much last year, and Thorne took such a big step back, was the fact that they just couldn't run the ball at all, and so there was no threat.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've got Samac as number 10. So we'll move on. Not a whole lot to say about the offensive line. So we'll move on to number 9. Who you got?
I got Derek Harmon and Simeon Barrow, kind of just that, yeah. But Harmon's my number 9 choice, but yeah, that interior um defensive tackles. I think Harmon played really well last year. He was a surprise, and he looks like he could potentially be an NFL prospect 2 years from now. I think, yeah, like again, he took a big jump. You can credit, Marco Coleman and Brandon Jordan to that. You can, I mean, just credit Harmon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's going to be an important piece in that interior front.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I had Derek Harmon as my number 9 guy
Oh,
too, which is kind of interesting. But no, like
yeah,
he was kind of a guy who kind of burst on the scene last year.
right.
Didn't really know he was going to have the impact that he did, but with Jacob Slade getting hurt and missing multiple games, somebody had to step up and play that other defensive tackle next to Simeon Barrow. And Harmon was really good, especially against the run. It seemed like, and was pleasantly surprised with him as a redshirt sophomore. Just like you said, he's kind of bursting out of the scene. Now he's got a year of experience under his belt, and I do think Michigan State's defensive line is probably the strongest unit on the team right now, just off of who they brought back and who they added in the recruiting class. Um, but yeah, he's a big piece, and so we're on the same page with that. So I won't. You kind of nailed it. So I'll go. We'll go on to the next one, number 8.
Yeah, so for number 8, I said Darius Snow. I said,
Okay.
that mobility to linebacker, you have guys like Cal Halliday who are kind of more downhill run stuffer guys. Snow was at nickelback in 2021, and then they moved him to linebacker before he got hurt against Western. I think that's a good spot for him because he is a heavy hitter, and he did struggle a little bit covering some outside guys who were, I mean, they were smaller and faster. So I think moving him to linebacker really helps their dynamic. I think he did well covering tight ends and kind of guys like that and running backs as well. And he really has a good eye for the ball and kind of a almost a sixth sense. But yeah, so I think that I mean, it's important to have someone like that, especially if Windman goes back to D end, or even if he stays at linebacker, you have two guys who are pretty solid linebackers in coverage.
Yeah, I've got spoiler alert. I've got Darius a little bit higher on my list, but so I won't get into that yet. But no, he's definitely a guy who Michigan State missed last year, and losing him in the first game. So yeah, that was a huge loss for Michigan State.
Right.
Um, for number 8 for me, I had Trey Mosley, who we kind of both know as like the second most, or the second leading receiver, who we expect anyway to be that
Mhm.
second guy for whoever wins the quarterback battle, whether it be Peyton Thorne or Caden Hauser or even Noah Kim. Um, so yeah, I've got Mosley here. Um, an experienced dude, redshirt senior. Uh, he's had almost 900 yards of receiving the last 2 years, with 7 touchdowns. And so just a steady dude, not anybody like Mosley doesn't really jump off the screen at you when you're watching, but just a reliable guy, who is going to take on a bigger role this year with without Jeremy Bernard, without Jaden Reed. And so yeah, I got Mosley at number 8. Moving on to number 7. Who do you got at number 7?
Yeah, I got Caleb Coley. He's a sophomore. Played a little bit last year, cornerback. But a lot of people had some like high praise about him. He was kind of a late addition to the 2022 class, but he was really fast. I think he ran like a sub 4.4 at a camp for a 40-yard dash in high school. I think the team really likes his speed. You know, just getting another corner to play on the other side of Brantley is kind of a big importance to help that pass defense, because obviously we know, you know, how much they struggled the past couple years, and we did see improvement at the end of last season, or kind of even like a little earlier towards halfway through the last season we saw some improvement. So it's just kind of taking that extra step forward. And then again, like he's a Tucker guy, he's a Tucker recruit, so I think that's another key component to that, is that, you know, him and Brantley are both, you know, were recruited by this staff, and I think that that's an important piece to add on to that.
Okay. Um, yeah, once again, we're kind of in a similar spot. I have Charles Brantley as my number 7 guy. Just because, I mean, there's been so much turnover at the corner position over the last couple of years. You know, just trying different guys to figure out who can do a better job covering back there. And Brantley, he's I don't know exactly how to describe his cover skills. I think he's been solid, and he definitely brings the lumber when he hits somebody. There is room for improvement there. But he was the only Michigan State defensive back who had an interception last year. It was kind of thrown right to him by C.J. Stroud in the Ohio State game. But hey, they all count the same. So yeah, I got Brantley. There. I'm interested to see if he can take another step and improve as a cover corner. And because right now he's kind of got, like I said, that reputation of a guy who will hit you and can really help out in the running game. But I'd like to see him take another step forward as a cover corner. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to number 6. Who do you have at number 6?
All right, so number 6, I got Tumis Adele. Okay. Yeah, so just kind of that pass rush, that defensive end. Who's gonna play on the other side of, whether it be Winman or Chris Bogle? You know, obviously, by Job, the incoming freshman, getting a lot of praise. We'll see how that works out. You know, he could definitely make his way into the rotation, but I think just finding that guy who's going to be a starter, you know, I think he's going to, you know, be an every down kind of defensive end. You know, he's got mobility. I think they'll try to move him inside and outside too. So yeah, I mean, that's really all I got to say about him. I think, you know, spring will be telling to see where he plays and how much of an impact he makes. But obviously, coming from Texas A&M, there was a lot of high praise, and we'll see how big of an impact he can make in the fall.
Right. Kyle Cruz, I see your comment there. We'll get to it in a second. But thanks for listening. As far as Adelaide, do you think he's better suited to play defensive tackle or defensive end?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how they want to go about it. I think, you know, if he could be a interior guy on third down, maybe if they need a pass rush or want a little bit more speed, he could be a little outside guy. Especially if they're going against, you know, a team that likes to run the ball a lot. So yeah, I think it's gonna be situational. But yeah, it really just depends.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Kyle. So Kyle's asking about Ken Talley, the one-time Penn State commit. I think he was in the program and then hit the transfer portal last spring, I want to say. Yeah. And then transferred to Michigan State. We'll touch on him when we get into that instant impact freshman. We'll get more into that. For me, number 6, I've got Keyshawn Blackstock, who is the JUCO addition to Michigan State's 2023 recruiting class. Guy who's played meaningful college football already at was it Coffeyville in Georgia?
Yeah,
community college. Yeah,
it's in Kansas, I think.
Kansas. Okay.
Yeah.
And so here's a guy who has played tackle on a collegiate level, like I said, and Michigan State does need help along the offensive line, and he's a guy that is battling for a starting job. This is just kind of my gut feeling, but he's one of the guys that I would maybe project as a starter right now on Michigan State's offensive line. Um, and there's a lot of unknown because, again, he's played at a community college level, so we'll see how that translates to Big Ten football. But if he comes in, he was the number one rated JUCO offensive lineman. And so if that's a guy who you can plug right in and play and can give you good, meaningful stats on offensive line, that's a big area of need for Michigan State. So I got him at number 6.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll move on to the top 5 now. So who do you have at number 5?
Yeah, so I kind of following you a little bit. I said kind of split it between Spencer Brown and Brandon Baldwin.
Okay.
Just who's gonna fill those tackle spots now that Horst is gone. I mean, Spencer Brown had an injury, and then Brandon Baldwin played surprisingly a decent amount last year. And he was pretty decent. So I think and the addition of Blackstock and Stan Rammel, obviously both of them are freshmen, coming in. So we'll see how that, changes the dynamic of that. But I think, Brandon Baldwin and Spencer Brown will be battling out for a position at right tackle. And I think, that's a pretty important piece, especially, like you talked about, the run game was struggling, and then that affects the passing game. So we'll see. Spencer Brown is I think he's returning for his like 5th or 6th year now. So
Right.
we'll see how that impacts the team too.
Yeah, and just kind of play off of that a little bit. Offensive line coach Chris Kaplovich, he met with the media, I think yesterday, and he said that between Blackstock, Stanton Rammel, and Cole Dellinger, that was the best that he's seen from first year freshman, and he's been a coach for a long time now. That could be coach speak in spring, and there's a lot of spring optimism. That's kind of you hear a lot of that this time of year, but
Right.
it's got to be music to Spartan fans' ears because to have a good young crop of offensive linemen coming up and building for the future, that's just a huge area of need. So that was kind of an encouraging thing to hear. We'll see what that means when it comes into fall camp. So so for me at number 5, and yes, Kyle, 19 available offensive linemen this spring, which is a huge improvement from last year. I think they had 7 healthy bodies in spring last year, and that's why they weren't able to have an actual spring game. There's still no word on the format for the spring game this year, but kind of my gut instinct is that they're gonna probably have a scrimmage. That's my hope anyway. Maybe it's just what I'm hoping to see, but I think if they are able to do it, they'll do it. Because it's been a couple years. It's hopefully the weather will be better in a couple weeks too, so we can get a bigger crowd there at Spartan Stadium, and they can put on a bit of a show. So that's the hope. But yeah, moving on with my number 5 guy, I've got Jacoby Winmon. Obviously, he played a huge role on the defense last year. Was arguably their best defender through those first 8 games, and then he gets popped with a suspension after the Michigan tunnel thing, which was unfortunate because he was having such a good year. And he didn't make all Big Ten, did he? I don't think he did, but he's probably on his way to making all Big Ten if he doesn't get
he definitely
hit
was
with a suspension. So led the nation in forced fumbles despite only playing 8 games. Led the team in sacks. He's moving to linebacker. He's moving to linebacker full time. I think now he played defensive end and linebacker last year, but with the depth that they have now along the defensive front, it sounds like he's going to play exclusively linebacker this year, and he might play on the edge a little bit too. But yeah, if hopefully he can repeat what what he was able to do through 8 games last year, and we'll get to see it for 12 games this year. So he's my
Yeah.
number 5 guy.
Yeah.
All right, number 4. Who do you have?
All right, I got Malik Spencer,
Okay.
sophomore safety. I mean, again, like for most important, I think replacing Xavier Henderson is, one of the most important things. He was the leader of that defense for 2 years. He was a captain. He was very vocal. He really just embraced everything about MSU, and like, you know, he just represented them really well. So I think replacing him is a huge importance. And I think Malik Spencer, I remember, I want to say it was after the Wisconsin game, at the post game press conference. Uh, he talked a lot about how well Malik Spencer has been in practice and stuff, and said, look out for this guy for the next few years. So
Yeah.
I'll take his word for it, and I think he's gonna replace him and do a pretty good job. Obviously they have Jaden Mangum coming back too after his injuries. So yeah, just replacing safety is a big part of that defense.
Yeah. Obviously, when you lose a guy like Xavier Henderson, experienced, knows the stuff, got people lined up in the right spot. Yeah, we're going to need to see somebody emerge and take on that role. Kyle's asking about Dylan Tatum and Mangum staying at safety. I've heard that Tatum is working out at cornerback this spring.
Yeah, I think he played some nickel last year too.
Right.
So I think that's kind of where he's positioned around, his nickel or corner.
Yeah. As far
And
as Jaden Mangum, I'm pretty sure he's still at
yeah,
safety.
Mangum's
So
safety.
okay. Yeah. So for me, number 4, a bit of a uh, I don't know, highlight name. I got Caden Hauser as
Mhm.
my number 4 most important player. And it is, I'm going to put the emphasis on spring edition because we don't know who is going to be QB1 this fall.
All right.
But I've got Hauser at number 4 for the spring just because we know about the talent. We know about, he's a former 4-star kid. Um, Arm talent has never been an issue with him. That's kind of the thing that jumps off the screen when you watch his highlight tape. And he's the kind of guy who uh, Michigan State hasn't landed at quarterback in recruiting since. I mean, you might be better at this than me. Like, when's the last time they had a guy like this in recruiting?
I mean, I think their last 4-star quarterback was it was Lewerke. I'm pretty sure it was Lewerke, and then
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. I can't remember the last time they had someone this highly rated though. Besides that,
Wasn't I think Messiah DeWeaver was a 4-star too. Obviously didn't
oh yeah,
pan
that's
out.
true. Messiah
But I
DeWeaver.
but I think he was a 4-star guy. But like I know Kirk Cousin was a yeah, Theo Day. Kyle says Theo Day. He might have been a 4-star guy too. Kirk Cousin
Mhm.
was an under recruited guy. I think Connor Cook was an under recruited guy, and those guys obviously
Yeah,
had great careers at Michigan State. But like,
yeah. I
it's
know
been a minute
Damian
since.
Terry was
Yeah,
like one of the highest 4-star guys
yeah,
that
dual threat
people really
type.
wanted. Mhm.
Yeah, so I guess we haven't really seen one of these 4-star quarterbacks land and really work out for Michigan State in a long time. But by all accounts, and he listened to Jay Johnson talk about Caton Hauser a couple weeks ago and just how much he's developed and grown. It certainly sounds like he's right there as far as um, pushing Thorne for that starting job. And even if he doesn't win the starting job, another reason why I had him, this high on my list was, Peyton does need to be pushed by somebody.
Mhm.
And if Peyton ends up winning the job, it's because he went out and earned it, hopefully. And
Yeah.
that means he beat out a talented prospect in Caden Hauser. So that's who I've got at number 4. All
Mhm.
right, top 3. Who do you got?
All right, number 3, I got Jacoby Windman. I mean, I don't really know if I can say anything more than that you haven't already said. So
Right.
yeah.
All right, yeah. So you have Winman a little bit higher than me. Number three, I do have Peyton Thorne at number three. So like him and like I said, I think him and Hauser are kind of neck and neck in the quarterback battle right now, and I've got them neck and neck as far as importance. Obviously, the experience that Thorne brings is valuable. Um, he did not take the step last year that I kind of anticipated him taking as a second year starter, but we know about the lack of run game, and he kind of got banged up. But um, I think he would tell you, and he has said that it was a disappointing season for him as well. So yeah, he's my number three guy, and um, we'll see if he's able to hang on to the starting job, and what he if he does what he looks like this fall. But won't spend too much more time on that since we've already talked quarterbacks. All right, number two.
Yeah, number two, I have I kind of split it up again where I got Nathan Carter and Jalen Berger.
Okay.
Just kind of running backs, we talked about the run game. Does Berger take a jump now that he's in the system for over a year now? And then how does Carter come in and impact this team? And how much does he really play? And how are they gonna split time, or who's gonna win that job outright? That's kind of really a big deal. Obviously, now 2 years post Kenneth Walker, and we're
Right.
still talking about him. So yeah, like where does that go? And then like we talked about earlier with Thorne, like how does that affect the passing game and like just pretty much everything for MSU's offense.
Yeah, like when I did my article a couple weeks ago, I did top 15 most important players, but originally I did have Jalen Berger in there, I think at number 15, and I swapped him for Nathan Carter. So I'm kind of in that same mindset of, okay, who's going to be the lead back? Kyle's asking if Nathan Carter is 100%. He had a media availability, I think last week, and sounds like he's good to go. Sounds like he's recovered from the shoulder injury. And he's a full go this spring. So yeah, I think he is at 100%, and um, just be interesting to see, like you said about Berger and Carter. I think those two guys are the leading candidates to be that top tailback, and then Jaron Mangum, brother of Jaden. I kind of see him taking on that like Elijah Collins role this year too, like as the red zone back,
Potentially, yeah.
third down back. Um, so, and we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, so um, yeah, Nathan Carter is and Jalen Berger both going to be playing an important role this year. For me, number two, I've got Darius Snow, and that's based on him being 100% healthy, and that's a big if right now. He has been limited in spring, I'm pretty sure, as he recovers from the leg injury that he suffered last year. Uh, and if Michigan State does have a spring game, there's zero chance that he'll be participating in that. But if he can get back to where we kind of expected him to be when last year started, and playing that one of those linebacker spots, especially on third down and passing down situations, I just think it's a huge upgrade in pass coverage if he can get back to where he was before he got hurt. So yeah, I've got Darius Snow there. All right, now your number one guy, who is it?
Yeah, so for number one, I have Peyton Thorne. I
Okay.
think, like we talked about, just in terms of pure importance to the team, I think, obviously quarterback is the most important, and there's a little bit of controversy and a question mark. But like you said, Caden Hauser, whether he starts or not is really gonna push Thorne. I think Thorne is still gonna it look in my humble opinion, I still think Thorne will be the starter for the time being.
Yeah.
But we'll see how much Hauser, like you said, pushes him, and then how much better that makes Thorne, and then the rest of that offense.
Yeah.
Because really that was the problem during the end of the season. I know we talked about like the defense and their flaws lately, but I mean, even in looking back at like the Michigan game, I mean, they didn't let Michigan score more than 30,
Right.
which was surprising. And I mean, MSU didn't even score in the second half.
No.
Obviously the end of that Indiana game, they just settled for field goals, can get anything there. Yeah,
Is
like the
that
Maryland game struggled to score.
yeah?
Um,
Was the Indiana game? There was one game this year where Peyton scrambled and fumbled, and it was late in the game where either Michigan State's either going trying to tie it or take the lead in it. It might have been the Indiana game. It just that memory
I
just
think
kind
it
of
was
popped into my.
I think it was the first drive of the second half against Minnesota. I want to say
Oh,
that.
yeah, that
I
could be
think,
it. That could be it because it was like
yeah,
they
because
had a
they
chance to
drove
kind of
all the
get
way.
back.
Yeah, they drove all the
Yeah,
way down the field, and then he just fumbled at
like
the
the
goal
10 or
line.
something like that.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, just getting that offense back to scoring more than like 28, 30 points per game, like scoring more than 30 points per game is definitely the biggest need for that offense.
right. Just gonna answer Steve's question right now. He asked, "What will the record be this year for Michigan State football?" We kind of touched on this a little bit in our last episode, but yeah, I'm right around 7-5, 8-4, kind of leaning more towards 7-5 right now. Just to answer that question real quick.
Yeah, 7-5. I think 8-4 would be a home run. Like I
Yeah,
think that'd be
tough schedule.
great. But yeah, it is a very tough schedule.
Yeah. All right, and my number one guy, I've got Keon Coleman. Seems kind of obvious, a little cliche, and I know it's tougher for a wide receiver to make an impact like a running back because he just doesn't get the ball in his hands as often. But I almost feel like Keon has to be Kenneth Walker light this year, as in just that guy that the defense has to pay attention to and has to focus on. And just occupies two defenders, maybe like the corner and then an over the top safety. If he can be that kind of threat, it's just now you're playing 9 on 10 maybe the rest of the offense.
Mhm.
So that's why I have him at number one. I think he's Michigan State's most talented player on offense. Certainly
Very
most
easily.
very easily. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
With his athleticism and the ability to high point the ball. Um, so that's again kind of cliche to have him up there, but that's who I had as the most important guy.
Mhm.
Um, all right, so we'll move on from that. Hopefully, you guys kind of just enjoyed that back and forth with who we had with football. Scott McGraw said, "Who do you think will start at quarterback?" I'm kind of with you, Aiden. I think Peyton Thorne is the guy week one, but not necessarily the guy who finishes the season. And that a lot of that
Yeah.
depends on how he looks, how he plays, what the offense looks like, what the record is, because you get to a certain point, and if they're like fighting for bowl eligibility or something like that, maybe it's time to give the younger guy a go. I'm just kind of spitballing out here right now, but yeah, I think it's going to be Thorne at the end week one. Not necessarily sure that he'll finish the year.
Mhm.
Um, all right, so moving on to basketball recruiting. Michigan State did just land a top 50 2024 recruit in Kurtang from Bradford Christian Academy in Haverhill, Massachusetts. He's ranked number 37 overall, according to the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, number 8 shooting guard in his class, and the top player out of the state of Massachusetts. Michigan State beat out Providence and Rutgers for his commitment. And so, Aiden, just kind of your initial thoughts on Kurtang committing to Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, when you see the top three of Rutgers and Providence, you're probably thinking like, yeah, I would expect MSU to win that. Like that should be like easy slam dunk kind of win in that recruitment battle. But a lot of scouts and stuff would say I wouldn't be surprised if he was a 5-star. A lot of people think
Yeah,
he's deserving of a 5th star. And we do have Like Michigan State has that point guard position, seems to be locked up for at least, the near future, at least the next 4 years or
Yeah.
so. So he adds some wing, some depth there, a little bit of size. He's around 6'5", I think. So he'd be like the tallest guard right now on MSU currently. So I think, yeah, just adding a little bit of size, his shot looks pretty nice. Just, yeah, like he's developed pretty well already, and it looks like he can continue to develop even further. So I think that's just a win in general, and I think that's a player that Tom Izzo, uh, like that kind of prototypical Tom Izzo guard or shooting guard.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that's a big win for them, and that's their, I think, fifth 4-star in a row or something like that
Right.
for
Right.
recruiting. So, and another guy who's in the top 50.
Right. Thing I kind of liked when I watched him commit when he was live on, I think it was 24/7 who carried his commitment. But he talked about how he's a guy who likes to come off of screens, and Michigan State does run a lot of pin down screens for its off guards. Kind of a throwback like Rip Hamilton type as far as like coming off those screens, catch and shoot type guy, and obviously a ton of value in guys like that who it's kind of a lost art now in basketball because so much is off the dribble and one-on-one. Even college is starting to trend that way a little bit, nearly as much as the NBA. But I like the fact that he's a little bit of a throwback, a guy who um, can play off the ball and doesn't have to have the ball in his hands in order to make an impact on offense. And when you've got Jeremy Fears for the next couple of years, Trey Holloman's already in the program. When you talk about point guard for the next several years, like those are the kind of the guys after AJ Hogard wraps up his career next year. Allegedly, we'll see. Obviously, I think he probably has a COVID year if he wanted to come back for a fifth year, but we don't want to get into that. But so yeah, I like like I said, I like the fact that he can play off the ball because Michigan State does have a lot of on ball point guard types in the system already. And so a nice change of pace with Kurt Tang. Obviously, he won't be around for another a year after next year. So it'll be Jeremy Fears, Xavier Booker, Cohen Carr, and Garrick Norman kind of getting their feet wet next year. And then we have 2024 to look forward to Kurt Tang. And another guy who's set to make his announcement this month is Jesse McCulloch out of Cleveland, Ohio. He is I think 3 out of the 4 major recruiting services have him listed as a 4-star. Rivals has him listed as a 3-star. But yeah, he's a guy who is down to Michigan State, Alabama, Xavier, and I think Virginia Tech are his 4 finalists, and he's making his college decision on April 20th. So we'll be tuned in for that. Michigan State does lead in like the crystal ball predictions on 24/7 Sports for him. And I think On3 has Michigan State as the favorite to land him right now too. So that would be another 4-star guy, this time a big. He's listed as a center, but he's only 6'9". So yeah, that kind of speaks more power forward type to me, just because I don't know, 6'9" for a college center is pretty small, or not very tall. So and who knows though, as he's going to be a high school senior this year, he might not be done growing. So maybe by the time he's on campus, if he commits to Michigan State, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but if he commits to Michigan State, maybe by the time he's in East Lansing, he's a little bit taller. So yeah, we'll be watching for that commitment. Like I said, Alabama, Virginia Tech, and Xavier are the other schools in on his recruitment. Going back to Kurt Tang real quick. I found it interesting. I know he's a East Coast guy, but what a huge, I don't want to say missed opportunity, but like if Rutgers had landed him, that would have been a huge commitment for Steve Peichel. Just because Rutgers basketball, not the highest profile of programs, but a program that has really ascended over the last couple of years. So always nice to beat out another Big Ten team for a commitment. So just last
Yeah.
thought on him. Um, I could be wrong on this. You might know better than me, but it does seem like after Jesse McCulloch, that Michigan State might, if they land Jesse McCulloch, they might be done for the cycle. I mean, there might. I mean, are they in on any other names? Do you know?
Um, I not that have like really appeared like out of like as relevant as
Yeah,
McCulloch
like
or
high profile guys
Kurtzing.
anyway.
Yeah, not really. I think they still are kind of reaching out to players just to make sure that, they have all their bases covered. But I think that really depends on if they think, someone like Booker is going to go pro. I think, yeah, like obviously they can't account for, potential transfers. But I think, in the future, I think with the amount of talent that they have gotten through recruiting and that they've kept that are homegrown, I think it wouldn't be out of the ordinary if like, someone just end up transferring and then Izzo would take a guy from the portal just because he didn't really plan on, said player leaving. So I think they're just, making calls now, but not really
Right.
kind of.
And it could be a situation like last year's class, the 2022 class, where kind of late in the cycle they take Carson Cooper because they needed another
Right.
big after Julius Marble transferred. So it could be a situation like
Mhm.
that where you take a flyer on a kid, and I mean, shoot, Carson Cooper was way ahead of schedule in my opinion from what we saw this year. Played very
Mhm.
sparingly early on in the season, but then by the time March rolls around, he's playing meaningful 9-10 minutes a game,
Right.
um, and looks like a really good defensive center potentially in the years to come. A good foundation there. Obviously has work to do on the offensive end, but so yeah, that could be another situation like that in 2024. Assuming Jesse McCulloch commits and joins Kurtang, might see another guy.
Mhm. Yeah, I know. There's a question here that says, "Is Cooper staying?" I'm like
Yeah,
99% sure he is. I think it would be a shock to everyone that he
he kind of
leaves.
made a buzz with that tweet that he sent out. As far
Yeah.
as I don't know, don't remember off the top of my head exactly what it said, but it was almost like I think it was just a kind of a joke as far as guys making college decisions or one and
Mhm.
dones and things like that. And he kind of threw it out there as a joke, and it kind of created a big stir on social media over, oh, is he going to transfer or what? But no, I think that was just
Yeah.
um, it wasn't on April Fools, but it was like almost a new April Fools type joke.
Yeah.
So yeah, and as far as Brooks transferring, again, we talked about this a little bit on our last podcast. You can check that out at Spartan Nation Podcast on YouTube. But just to get into it a little bit with Brooks, yeah, Michigan State, I think is going to be okay at the wing. Um, Brooks really saw his playing time diminish as the season went along. You've got Cohen Carr, who I think is going to, we're going to talk about instant impact freshmen with football a little bit later, but just I'll touch on it right here. I'm kind of going to go out on a limb and say that as far as the 4-man recruiting class for 2023, I think Cohen Carr might be the biggest impact guy just because he plays a position that has a bigger need for Michigan State right now and playing
Mhm.
that wing. Um, Super athletic. We've seen the dunk highlights and things like that. We'll see if he can play defense at the college level. That'll be probably the biggest determining factor with how much playing time he gets. But I just a super athletic kid. Um, and at a position of need for Michigan State. So I can definitely see him being maybe that biggest impact guy for amongst the freshmen for basketball. Obviously Xavier Booker with just being a top 10 guy, he's going to come in with a lot of high expectations. But I'll go out on a limb and I'll say Cohen Carr. With that, we'll transition into the instant impact football freshman, which you wrote an article on this a couple weeks ago.
Mhm.
And so I'll kind of just let you take the lead on this.
All right, yeah. So I wrote a article about potential instant impact freshmen for MSU football, and all these guys have really been in they came in spring. So I really didn't account for all of the freshmen. It was kind of just guys that were already enrolled.
Yeah,
But my three biggest guys I said were Jordan Hall by Joe, or yeah, linebacker Jordan Hall, defensive end by Job, and then offensive tackle Keyshawn Blackstock. And you can really you can loop in Stan Rammel there at that offensive tackle position. But yeah, I think all three guys are really going to have chance to play. Obviously talked about Kapilovic. Um, so with that said, he spoke really highly of those guys. So there's that. We talked about Duron Reynolds coming in as the new defensive tackle coach.
yeah,
So we'll see. Everyone really gets a clean slate. And there was actually an article that came out today. I think it was from the Athletic. I don't know if I should be plugging other
it's not
sources, but
no big
it's
deal.
fine.
It's cool.
But they talked about Mel Tucker and kind of his relationship with the gym and the trainer of the guy in Oklahoma that By
Yeah,
Job went to. And there's other guys in this 2024 class. David Stone is a big name. I think his name is like Zadavius Sims.
yep,
Another guy, big guy, big name that they all go to that gym. So I think, yeah, just relationships there. I think Jordan Hall is another guy. You'll see him. He's very similar to Cal Halliday or like a typical like MSU linebacker from the past, like Bocce or one of the Bola brothers or like even Darian Harris, guys like that, who's just a downhill run stuffer. He can really cover sideline to sideline. He played at IMG Academy, so the talent level and the competition. Not only he played against other teams, but also just at practice every day he was going against Power Five guys who were playing at Big Ten and SEC schools. So that's really big. So yeah, those three guys, I can see all of them. Whether it's special teams or actually getting on the field during some high leverage situations. I wouldn't be surprised if any of those four guys really played.
yeah. I've seen some practice footage of spring practice, and
Mhm.
like when Jordan Hall came on screen, it was like, holy crap, that kid's a freshman because he does
Right.
not look like a freshman at all.
Mhm.
He's totally built, big kid, fast, athletic, strong. Looks like a guy who's been in the strength and conditioning program already for like 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
That's kind of when I I think I read your article first, and then I saw the video of Jordan Hall. It's like, yeah, that that looks like a guy who can you can plug and play right away. And
Mhm.
also the coaches have talked about like just his leadership skills, and not being shy even as a freshman of coming in and holding guys accountable and just instantly being a leader. So yeah, he definitely sounds like a guy who's going to get on the field in 2023. Maybe not in a starting role, but he's going to get his feet wet, and a guy who is worth being excited about in the years to come too. And hopefully, like again, going back to the spring game, hopefully we'll see an actual scrimmage format this year, and maybe get to see what he looks like in full pads and hitting some people on
Right.
April 15th. So yeah, definitely a guy who I'm excited to see. And then Bai Job is the kind of quintessential easy one, just
Mhm.
because top 50 type caliber guy. Um, and Michigan State does need some more help off the edge. So another good guy there.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I was gonna say we could go back earlier. I know someone was asking about Ken Talley.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, I think he's another guy that, we could see being moved around. He could play potentially and he could be a a three technique potentially. So we'll see where he moves around. I think right now he's probably projected as an end. But yeah, he's a guy that could definitely get in there. I think he's been around the program. He left Penn State at kind of an odd time where he
Right.
was around MSU's program during the season last year.
Right.
Um, and I don't think he practiced or anything. He was just kind of just there. But um,
Yeah, he's almost like it's almost like a redshirt freshman. There's a like back in the
mhm,
day, I don't even know if they use this anymore, but there was a gray shirt where like guys would be like stashed away, like high school guys would be stashed away and not technically on the roster in order to preserve like the 85 scholarship thing, but there was
mhm,
like an understanding between coach and player that yeah, you're going to be a gray shirt, which means you're not going to use a scholarship this year, but you will in years to come, and different teams would like stash extra scholarship guys that way almost. So he's almost like that where, yeah, he was around the team. I can't remember if he was on the roster or not. I don't think that he was.
no, I don't
But
think so.
yeah, so, but he does have, like over the last year though, he's willing to get into the playbook and things like that. And so he's not just some regular true freshman. He's somewhere in the middle
Mhm,
of a true freshman and a redshirt freshman. So and another four-star kid. Don't remember off the top of my head exactly where if he was like if he was like top 150 or top 200 or something like that, but it seems like top 150 type kid. So yeah, like anytime you can add one of those types of players, it's only going to benefit your program going forward.
mhm,
We are at 50 minutes right now, so I'm going to scroll through and maybe check on some other questions,
yeah,
and then we'll kind of wrap it up
mhm,
for tonight.
yeah. All right,
Um,
another one asking about Van Summeren. Yeah, he'll play interior
yeah,
defensive tackle. He got a little bit of time last year, but yeah, again, he's another guy who adds a lot of depth to that D line. I mean, it's really just going to be hard to play over Harmon for how well Harmon played last year.
yeah,
Um, but he will see the field a decent amount this season
yeah. It's going to be
for
tough to
sure.
crack the two deep for sure on defensive
Mhm.
line, just because Michigan State does have a lot of options there.
Yeah.
But yeah, a guy who could play on special teams too. Um, Maybe punt block. Yeah, I'm sure they'll find ways of getting him on the
Mhm.
field.
I mean,
Um,
obviously, like, yeah, they don't. I mean, defense tackles don't play every snap either, so like
right.
they'll rotate him in. So yeah.
Yep. Cameron had a question, or not really a question. He just said hopefully Tyson Walker, Joey Hauser, and Hall come back for next year. Joey Hauser is pretty much gone. I'm pretty sure. I mean, he even kind of said that
Mhm.
himself. It would be kind of a big shock if he, first of all, he has to apply for a sixth year with the NCAA, then it has to be granted, and then he would have to want to come back. And so just too many moving parts there. I think he's ready to move on and uh, and play professional basketball somewhere, whether that's in the G League, starting out in hopes of making his way up to an NBA franchise, or if he goes overseas, we'll see what happens with him. And we talked about this in our last podcast, but my gut instinct right now is about. Um, I'm fairly certain that Malik Hall will come back, just because I don't know what prospects are there as far as him playing professional basketball next year. With after dealing with the injuries and things like that, it just seems like the best uh, basketball decision for him would be to come back. And Tyson Walker, I'm not as sure about, but I'm still leaning like 60-40 towards him coming back, and we'll see what happens with him. But and if that does happen, Michigan State's going to have, yeah, depth was such a big issue each of the like this year and last year too, and all of a sudden they'll have a ton of depth in the backcourt, with AJ Hogard, Tyson Walker if he returns, Jaden Akins, Jeremy Fears, Trey Holloman. Like all of those guys can can play meaningful minutes. Um, and if I do like. I know parts of the fan base are kind of getting tired of Malik College just because he struggled with consistency and had the issues with injuries this year. But like because Michigan State is pretty thin in those forward spots, I do think that's a net gain if he does come back.
Mhm.
Again, that doesn't mean he'll start all year. He came off the bench most of this year. Uh, with Booker and Cohen Carr, they're going to have other options there. But like this is still a guy who um, can play. Is a pretty good two-way player as far when he's healthy about defense, offense. A better defender than Joey Hauser was. Not the shooter anywhere near the shooter that Hauser was this last year, but a guy who can impact on both ends. So
Yeah, and I mean, with Booker coming in along with Cohen Carr, and then if Walker potentially comes back, just yeah, with those four impact freshmen, and then everyone getting a year older, I think they'll rely on Hall less. Like you're not gonna expect him to score 12 points per game. Like no one's gonna expect him to do that next season if he comes back.
right,
So I think that takes the pressure off of him a little bit more, and I think that would ease the fans a little bit more too. Just in that situation.
right. We got another one here about going back to the record for Michigan State. Um, 7-5, 8-4, leaning towards 8-7-5. What's one game I think they will lose? I mean, there's like we talked again. I keep saying it, but we talked about this more in the last episode. But there's like 6 games that Michigan State has on the schedule that I would classify as really tough games. They're going to play Washington at home, Michigan and Penn State they get at home, Ohio State and Columbus. Good luck. And then you go to Minnesota and to Iowa as 2-year crossover opponents. And so that's 6 really tough games. And then you've got, they lost to Maryland last year, and Maryland comes to
Mhm.
Michigan State this year, but that's a team you lost to last year. You lost to Indiana last
And
year.
Indiana,
Shouldn't have
yeah,
happened. Shouldn't have happened. Like it shouldn't have happened, but it did. And that one
right.
was, at home. So by saying 7-5, I'm giving Michigan State games that maybe they didn't earn based on what we saw last year. But I do think the team will be better, and I do think injuries played a big impact on why this team went 5-7 last year. And
Mhm.
so I'm expecting improvement. Um, I know, like when you say 7-5 or even 8-4, it doesn't like produce a whole lot of excitement in the fan base. But when you look
Mhm.
at if you add the context of what this schedule is going to look like and what happened last year, and again, I think 7-5 and 8-4 would be a good year for Michigan State and would kind of show that things are trending in the right direction under Mel Tucker as more of his guys kind of come into the system. It's really it's year it's year 3.5 for him because he had the COVID year. He comes in February in 2020, no spring practice, can't even meet with the team over the summer because of COVID. Uh, Started to see guys face to face, in fall camp to get ready for. And then I think even though they went 2-5 that year, I think they overachieved. They beat Michigan at Michigan.
Mhm.
Um,
A top
that's
10
enough.
Northwestern team too.
Is that yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
like even with just the 2 wins, like that team had no business competing. Period. And you beat your rival, and you beat Northwestern. So like ahead of schedule, I would say.
Yeah.
And then
I
obviously the
mean,
11th. Go ahead.
yeah. No, oh, I was just gonna say, obviously, like I mean, I remember the Rutgers game very
Yeah.
well because I was like, you got to be kidding me! They literally gave Rutgers their first win in the conference since, like, I don't even remember. It was like 2017 or something like that.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and then they go out and beat Michigan the next week. So you're like, okay, I guess it's a bit of a wash and probably a trade that a lot of MSU fans would be willing to make.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, like there is after the 5-7 season last year. Obviously, he gets the big contract after midway through the 11-2 year, or 2/3 of the way through, and now the fear is, oh man, we paid this guy all of this money, and it was all Kenneth Walker. I
Mhm.
think if you go 7-5 or 8-4 this year, you put some of that um, doubt and some of that concern to bed, um, if you're able to achieve that record. So
Definitely. And I think a lot of the teams that they're going to play have also gotten better from last year. I think I might be in the minority here, but I really think Penn State has a serious shot to win the Big Ten, and
yeah,
I think they got a lot better. And I think if I had to bet my money right now in April, I might bet them over Michigan and Ohio State, which is saying a lot. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, there's that. So and then you also have Michigan and Ohio State.
right,
Um, you know, Washington, they return, Mike Penix, as well as, a lot of their other production. Obviously Jeremy Bernard coming back will
yeah.
be an interesting dynamic. Um, but yeah, I think, Minnesota on the road will be interesting. They lost some stuff, but they'll still be good under PJ Fleck. Iowa, it seems that their offense has gotten a little bit better. Obviously,
Can't be any worse.
uh, yeah, seriously. People may clown Cade McNamara, but that is like light years ahead of what it was before. So
Right.
yeah,
Heck of a
um,
lot better than Spencer Petras and
right,
whatever else or Iowa had on the roster
yeah.
last year. So, um, yeah, I had one more thought, but it kind of eluded me.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. We went over an hour, which was a little bit longer than we intended to, but God, appreciate the questions that we got from you guys, and we'll continue to do this, and we'll try to let people know when we are going to come back on. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it.